Hi there, this is Jonathan Ginsberg. I'm one of the attorneys here at the Bankruptcy Law Network. And today I'd like to talk to you about exemptions in bankruptcy. And basically, exemptions are created by either the state legislature or Congress, and it determines which property does not count for purposes of your assets. In other words, if you have exempt property, it is not going to be taken by the trustee. It's something that you keep regardless of whatever happens in bankruptcy. So in other words, if you go into a Chapter 7 and you discharge $100,000 of credit card debt, for example, and you've got household goods and clothes and things like that, you keep all that. You don't give that up. So basically, this is property that you keep regardless of whatever else happens in bankruptcy. And the key thing to know about exemptions is that every state is going to be different. I practice in Georgia, and in Georgia, the legislature here in Georgia has set out an exemption statute, the exemption laws. Some states have opted out, which Georgia has, of the federal exemption law. Other states use a federal exemption law. Every state is different, so the numbers that apply in Georgia do not apply in South Carolina or Michigan or Tennessee. It's going to be very different. So you need to be very careful about looking on the internet, and I'm going to show you in a second how some very well-known resources are absolutely wrong that are on the internet. You need to talk to an experienced lawyer in your jurisdiction. So the examples I'm giving you are from Georgia because that's what I know. But again, don't assume that these figures, the exemption numbers I'm talking about, apply in your state because they most likely do not. But I just want you to, the purpose here is to give you an idea of the principle of how this all works. So let's start by taking an example of a house worth about $250,000. And again, the market value of the house is something you're going to need to know. And just as an aside, what I do is I have a real estate agent come on, give a drive-by appraisal and pull some comps. You don't need a formal appraisal in most places, but you need to have a reasonable idea of what the value of your house is. We're going to subtract from that the mortgage, which is $175,000. That leaves us $75,000 of equity. That's if you were to sell your house and pay off the mortgage, you would get a check for $75,000. And I realize that there's real estate commissions and other things that go on there, but just for purposes of our example, you would walk out with $75,000. In Georgia, an individual can declare $21,500 as exempt. So we subtract $21,500 from that $75,000. That leaves us $53,500 of what is called non-exempt equity. And that's what we have to worry about in a bankruptcy. Not $75,000, we subtract $21,500, we're left with $53,500 of non-exempt equity. So if you go into a bankruptcy, you're looking at Chapter 7 versus a 13, you've got $45,000 of unsecured debt. If you went into a Chapter 7, the trustee would say, okay, we've got $53,500 of non-exempt equity. I'm going to sell that. I'm going to take that property, seize it, liquidate it, and then I'm going to pay off the $45,000 in full. If you go into a Chapter 13, because you've got more equity, non-exempt equity than unsecured debt, you'd have to pay 100 cents on the dollar. If, on the other hand, you had $90,000 of unsecured debt, we would divide 90,000 by 53.5. It comes up with 59%. What that says is that you go into a Chapter 13, you'd have to pay at least 59 cents on the dollar, 59% plan, to meet what is called the liquidation test in Chapter 13. So that's why the value of your property and the amount of your exemption, the amount of non-exempt equity is so important. It tells us whether you can fit into a Chapter 7 or if you go into a Chapter 13, one of the factors that determine what you have to pay in the Chapter 13. Let's give another example. Let's say we have a vehicle, motor vehicle, car, truck, worth $25,000. The loan against it's $13,500. That leaves $11,500 of equity. Now in Georgia, we can shelter or declare exempt $5,000 for a motor vehicle, but we also have something called a wild card exemption in Georgia, where we can shelter an extra $1,200 plus up to $10,000 of our real estate exemption that's unused. So in this case, so in other words, if you didn't have a house and you haven't used up your real estate exemption, you can take up to $10,000 of that $21,500 and apply it to any property. This is called stacking exemptions. So since we've got more than enough exemption available, we add $5,000, $6,500 of the wild card, we have zero non-exempt equity. So instead of having $11,500 to worry about, we have zero. So if we go into a Chapter 7, you could declare that vehicle, that equity exempt, reaffirm the or the loan, and basically keep your vehicle and discharge your unsecured debt. So the point here is not to go through all the exemptions, because again, there's categories for everything from household goods to jewelry, tools of the trade, at least there are in Georgia. What I want you to see, though, is that understanding how exemptions work is not intuitive. If you try to do this on your own and you went online and you looked for rules about exemptions in your state, you may or may not get the right information, but you wouldn't necessarily know about stacking of exemptions, or you wouldn't know about case law. And for example, in Georgia, there's some case law that talks about your right to exempt retirement money, and it's unclear in the statute that you can do that. So again, this is not something that you want to do on your own. Now, just to show you what's going on the internet, here is a website from FindLaw, which is a well-known legal publisher, and it's got the exemption. I typed in Georgia exempt property bankruptcy, and it came up with the correct information. We've got $21,500 in real estate. We've got $5,000 in household goods with no one item worth more than $300. We've got $500 in jewelry. And by the way, all these numbers here, in Georgia at least, you double them if you file jointly with your spouse. So this is an accurate reflection of the exemption statute. Over here, however, we have the Justia website. When Justia is a well-respected, well-known legal publisher, but their statement about, or their page about Georgia's exemptions are just wrong. Here it says that the debtor can exempt up to $10,000 of real estate. Well, again, in Georgia it's $21,500. So if you're relying on Justia, with all due respect to them, you would be making a mistake. So this is a reason why when you go into a bankruptcy, you want to speak to an attorney who does this on a regular basis, who understands the rules. And be aware that when we do bankruptcies, when I file bankruptcy, I use a program. I use one called Best Case, which is over $1,000. It's an investment. And so if I dabbled in bankruptcy, if I did 1 or 2 a year, I might not have an up-to-date version of Best Case, and I wouldn't have necessarily all the updates that they shoot out to us. I might file somebody's bankruptcy and put this information in here. This could be wrong. And obviously, if you declare the exemption incorrectly, you could either end up in a Chapter 13 when you could otherwise file Chapter 7, or you could declare less than you're allowed as far as your exemption and basically lose property or lose value. So it's really important to have an attorney who understands how the exemptions work and who can double check what the bankruptcy program is telling the attorney. And understand that bankruptcy is very much about details. I always tell people that I teach courses, CLEs, continuing legal education courses about bankruptcy, as well as some other topics. And with bankruptcy, it's very much about details. Other topics, it's big picture. For example, I do Social Security disability. It's very much big picture, and the details are important, but they're not the key thing. With bankruptcy, it's all about details, because again, you need to know $21,500 of exemption. You need to know about the means test that applies in Georgia as opposed to nationally. So, and just as another thing I want to show you here as well, here's the South Carolina exemption table, which again I'm assuming is correct. Real estate's $59,100. Again, in Georgia, it's $21,500. So if you go online and you just kind of type in bankruptcy exemptions, you could get the wrong one. So again, you want to really talk to an attorney who does this, who understands it. Obviously, the Bankruptcy Law Network is a good resource for you. We have attorneys in many jurisdictions. We're adding attorneys periodically. So if you live in one of these areas, certainly reach out to any one of us. We will be happy to help you or make a referral and show you how to maximize your exemptions and get the most out of your bankruptcy case. So hope you find this helpful. Again, my name is Jonathan Ginsberg, one of the attorneys here at the Bankruptcy Law Network. I practice in Atlanta, Georgia, the Atlanta area, North Georgia. If I can be of assistance to you, please let me know. Otherwise, I would refer you to the Bankruptcy Law Network and speak to one of my colleagues there. Thank you very much.